We're the two teachers. Welcome to Citizen U.
LIVEstyle. Tonight we're reviewing federalism.
You know, federalism is one of my favorite topics. It's that topic that says more government means less government, that division of power between national, state, and local governments.
Well, in these 200 years, I'm sure the divisions have changed, right?
Sure, the divisions have changed. Originally, in the original Constitution, the founders envisioned layer cake federalism, with particularly the national government divided from the state and local governments. That's changed into more marble cake federalism, particularly with the New Deal and with war.
I'll tell you what else has changed is where that power rests. It used to be kind of equally distributed, but now that power is more and more centered in the national government.
To kind of spice it up a little bit, what's the significance then of devolution and new federalism? Because isn't that kind of the exact opposite?
Well, this is the challenge as we study federalism. The challenge is it's changed. Certainly more and more power is found in the national government, but those conservative voices out there want to return to traditional federalism, to classical federalism. We call it new federalism, and that's where devolution comes in. Devolution is that concept that says, can't we return some of that power back to the states? And of course, this is what Republicans want. The Democrats like that power and that strong central government.
Republicans love states' rights these days. I think the best example was when we took the national speed limit and made it a state speed limit. And that happened in the 1990s when Republicans took over both chambers of Congress, and they allowed states to create their own state speed limits.
So then what are these reserved powers and how does that impact the Constitution?
Well, of course, when you talk reserved powers, Matt, you're talking about the 10th Amendment. In the 10th Amendment, the 10th of our Bill of Rights, the Founding Fathers wanted to assure the states that they would retain some power. In the 10th Amendment, they have the reserved powers. The problem is no specific or articulated powers. And so little by little, the national government has taken more and more. But don't forget, states still have power, and it's because the Bill of Rights guarantees it.
So, Mr. Larson, is this a unique thing to Americans, or does this also happen with other federalist governments?
Well, federalism is somewhat unique. In fact, we would call it the American experiment. And of course, one of the things we like about federalism, it allows states to experiment with policy. We call this the laboratories of democracy. So as we experiment with healthcare, for instance, let's have Massachusetts try it from the state level. Why experiment at the national level? If it fails, we all fail. Let one state fail.
And of course, the most recent topic on this is medical marijuana, where states have increasingly been legalizing medical marijuana, and some states even legalizing recreational marijuana as an example of the laboratory of ideas.
So then how has the Supreme Court interpreted our understanding of federalism?
Well, you can't answer that question without talking about selective incorporation. The idea that the 14th Amendment, increasingly over time, particularly over the last 100 years, the Supreme Court has said that states need to abide by certain parts of the Bill of Rights. It started with the First Amendment in Gitlow versus New York, and it's extended to most of the Bill of Rights, including our right to an attorney and our protection from unreasonable search and seizure.
Hey, have I told you guys my favorite federalism word? It's efficacy. Efficacy is that idea that me as the voter feels confident that the government speaks to my needs. Well, that's hard when all the power is in one centralized place. Federalism allows me, that individual voter, to have that sense that my government's close to me, that it matters, that they represent me. I love efficacy, and this is why I love federalism.
Sometimes we have that buzzword access points, the idea that federalism, because we're talking about national government, where the president and members of Congress and the House and the Senate, but then we also have state reps, we have governors, we have county board reps, school board reps, so many access points to try to shape policy at the national and local level with federalism.
Mr. Cunneen, how do these levels of government interact with one another? Are they clearly expressed powers, or do they mix and match to a certain extent?
A lot of times it depends on the issue. If you're talking about more of a national security issue, certainly the national government takes charge. But then we have some issues like immigration, for instance, where the national government is supposed to be securing the borders, but we know when you have undocumented immigration, it creates an issue with state governments. It creates an issue with local police force too. How do you enforce immigration, even though it tends to be a national issue, it certainly affects local government.
Well, don't forget this either. The government ultimately is about money. And as more and more of that money comes from the central government has taken on more and more power through grants and mandates. This is an important federalism distinction that through federal grants, states lose some of their power. Of course, if they're block grants, they lose a little bit less because they have more discretion.
Yeah, block grants have more flexibility. Categorical grants, much less flexibility because the federal government's telling the state and local government how to spend that categorical grant.
Hey, any other questions, guys, on federalism?
Well, how does all this relate to like grassroots movements?
Well, again, this is one of the great reasons federalism as an experiment has been so effective in this country. It allows people back in their home states to feel like they matter. It allows for these grassroots movements to form and get involved politically. We know the closer you are to your government, the more likely you are to participate. That's grassroots.
You probably see that most in the Electoral College, because if you're from a large competitive swing state, you're going to see in a presidential election a lot of literally grassroots campaigning, going door to door, a lot of phone calls, because in those swing states, because the Electoral College essentially is a state-by-state election, those swing states make a huge difference in the outcome of a presidential election.
And that's political efficacy in the making.
Oh, it is, Matt.
So what are the advantages and disadvantages to the system that we have?
Well, the advantages are plentiful. The
Okay.
disadvantages we can debate. But of course, one of the biggest disadvantages is inefficiency, duplication. We know we've got police forces and healthcare industries at the state level, at the national level, at the local level, law enforcement at the state level, national level, and the local level. Federalism is not efficient. And so a lot of people see, boy, government doesn't work very smoothly like a business. Of course not. It wasn't meant to be. Because remember, federalism was created to limit government. It wasn't created to make government more efficient. It was created to preserve our liberties.
Is that what referendums are for then?
Well, referendums can definitely be used by local government. There's no national referendum. The Constitution prohibits that. But certainly we know that states have increasingly been using referendum to allow citizens to participate directly. And local governments have been using referendums for the entire history of our country, particularly when it comes to issues of taxes.
Hey, thanks, guys. You've been reviewing federalism. We're the two teachers. No fancy words,
No fancy suits,
plain talk about issues you need to know.
just in time.